I've always been the type of collector to stick to certain genres whenever it comes to collecting and playing video games, whether it be RPGs, survival horror, fighters, you name it, that's what I stuck to. And also the type of person that looks at the actual artwork and the back of the actual game to see if I would be interested. Like this one, for example, Dark Cloud. I did this whenever I was at a game store that no longer exists now. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, Link. I'm like, that looks interesting reading it. So I took a chance on it. I think I paid about $5 to $10 for this copy. That's what I relied on back in the day whenever it came to actually adding games to my collection. And, starting off collecting, I actually started collecting on my own, like buying my own stuff whenever I was a teenager, got my own money, gonna start buying my games for myself instead of waiting on Christmas and birthday to get that. But now that I'm an adult and have adult money, I do what I want. I'm going to actually look into getting more for my collection. And as time went on, I'm thinking maybe I should go for a full set of something. I always had put that off. I'm like, nah, it's going to take up space. Nah, there's too much shovelware. There's a lot of cons that I thought constantly in my head as to why I didn't want to do it. Until I finally am like, well, wait a minute. There's some pros to this too. There's an upside to going for a full collection whenever it comes to a console that you love and adore. And for me, that was PlayStation 1. So today, I'm actually going to talk to you about my journey with going for a complete set with PlayStation 1, the pros and the cons. And yes, the pros do outweigh the cons in this situation. Now, I do want to stipulate this. This is my own personal experience whenever it comes to collecting for a full set of something. And each collector is different about how they actually go about doing that if they do decide to go that route whenever it comes to collecting. And some collections are a little bit smaller than others, not like the massive ass one that PlayStation 1 is, which is a huge undertaking in itself because there's over 1,000 titles for it. So let's talk about it. I'm going to start off with the cons, the bad. Ugh. There are 4 of them for me personally whenever it comes to game collecting. That would be accessibility, space, expense, and then the 4th one would be something that, is just going to come with time, and that's disc rot. So let's start off with the big one, space. Yeah, big, as in like, oh, I don't have enough room for that. It's a huge collection. Yes, pun intended with that. So whenever it comes to going for a full set of something, yes, space is definitely a must-have whenever you're going for a massive library like PlayStation 1. There's approximately around 1,284 games in the PlayStation 1 library. There's about 104 long box games for the PlayStation library. Now, long boxes are like this, and they come in like different ones. They come in ridged, flat, and then of course the plastic case. So they're going to be taller, so they're going to have to go on their own thing versus jewel cases, which are small like CD cases. So they're a little bit more compact and a little bit easier to store. So there's that to take into account. So where the hell am I going to put everything? Now, here's the thing about space. Yes, my game room is small. I know that. So whenever I thought about that, I'm like, well, let's see here. Where am I going to put everything and what am I going to do with that? So whenever I came to space, I basically had to rule out this. I had to actually limit what I collected for other systems versus, PlayStation being the priority because that was the main focus that I had. So that being said, if I want to go for another big collection, which is PS2, I think there's like maybe another 850 titles added onto that or 500, somewhere along those lines. I don't know how many there are for PS2. I don't know off the top of my head. It's a bigger library than PS1. I don't know where the hell I would put it. So that's something I have to weigh and take into account is the space. Whenever you are going for a full set, you have to take that into account about, where you want to put things. Do you want to keep it in the game room? Are you going to let it drift out into other parts of your house? For me, I want to keep it in here. New Gen stays in the living room. Retro is in here. And that's the way I want it to stay. And of course, now if you're going for a smaller set, it's going to be easier to actually maintain that and actually space stuff out and make it look a little bit nicer. Not have it like jam-packed, kind of like I do right now. But as time goes on, I'm like, okay, this can go here, this can go there. You maximize what you use as far as like your space goes. And when I mentioned the actual smaller collections, yes, I'm actually going for full sets of Dreamcast and Wii U, but they're a lot smaller compared to PlayStation 1. So when I think about that, they are doable and they are actually okay to put in this space because they're not going to take up as much room versus, like PS2 would because they're bigger actual cases. And then, of course, where the hell am I going to put it? On the wall? No, because it'll fall the hell off, and I don't trust that shit. So whenever it comes to space, my advice to you is this. look at what you have as far as your space in, whether in your retro room, game room, wherever you're thinking about putting it. And then, of course, just like maximize what you have. There's plenty of shelving out there that you can actually put a lot of great games on, and maximize the space that you will have. Amazon's a great place to look for shelving. That's where I got all my shelves from, is from Amazon. IKEA would be ideal because they have the Billy shelves, but I don't have a damn IKEA where I live, and I ain't paying that damn shipping for those shelves, so that's out. So that's my advice as far as like space goes. Space was not really the biggest worry for me, because even though I have a small game room, like I said, maximization, I've said that like 3 or 4 times now, was the key thing for me. And I was strategic about what I did as far as like my placement in things in the shelves that I bought. And of course, yeah, shelving is going to be expensive too. You're going to look at like certain ones that are $100, $300. Like I mentioned, the Billy shelves are not cheap. And I would love to have them because I love the aesthetic that they bring. But like I said, I ain't paying that damn shipping for them. But I found something that actually made sense. The shelving that I have my jewel cases on is beautiful. It's taller than me. Holy shit, it's over 6 feet. I'm a shorty. I'm 5'3". Short and sassy. But it works. And of course, now I'm almost out of room. Now that I'm over almost at 800. I'm literally 3 away from 800 games. So I'm literally over halfway. So I'm about to actually run out of room. So I need more shelves. Now, another thing I want to mention too about space is that, whenever it comes to collecting, I don't like stacking stuff on top of stuff, because cases, especially jewel cases, are fragile. So that's another thing I wanted to talk about too, is that, the long boxes, they take up their own space, but the jewel cases, like CD cases, y'all know that they could break, crack, or whatever the case. And, you don't want them to be like that. I'm okay with wear and tear on my cases. I mean, I buy them like that sometimes. But if I buy it in pristine condition, I want to keep it that way. So I try not to stack anything on top of each other. So I try to have a nice spread out, so that way it has room to breathe and it's not like all squished in there too. So make sure that whenever you're doing your actual shelving coordination, not to squeeze it together like that. Now, moving on to the one that most people try to avoid whenever it comes to full set collecting, and that is expense. Expense is a huge one. You getting out them 20s, them hundreds, that money. It does cost a lot of money to actually go for a full set, especially if it's a big one like this one, because there's a lot of heavy hitters. Yes, whenever I think heavy hitters, I think of something that's over $200 or $300. And there are games in the PS1 library that have went up to that price, because the pricing is just ridiculous in this market whenever it comes to retro games. So naturally, I kind of am regretting not starting this earlier. But then again, at the same time, I don't, because of the fact that I like where I'm at with my collection and what I've experienced, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But then again, you have that lingering thought, things would have been cheaper back then, but I don't let it weigh on me too much. Now, pricing is something that is the big one for me. That is the one that made me kind of like be like, I don't know, because all this stuff's expensive, But I thought, I'm like, okay, I'm in a good place. I can budget for this. And I weighed the pros and cons, like I said, before I did this. And the expense thing was the one that weighed heaviest on my mind. And I'm like, okay, I can move this, I can ship this, I can do this. Budgeting is a key thing if you're going to go for a full set. Now, I know a lot of people cannot afford a full set, and I completely understand that. And, it is something that I'm fortunate enough to be able to do. But, like I said, for many years, I never did it because of the expense was in my head. But now that I'm older and I've actually got, my finances in check, I'm able to actually, get that for my collection and get things that I want, that I never had the opportunity before to do. So, but that being said, though, I can't always buy everything at once. I still have to budget, because adulting 101, make sure that you are fed and you have a roof over your head before you do anything. You never want to put yourself in a spot to where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have bought that. What am I going to do now? Never do that. Always budget and keep it on your budget whenever you're collecting. That's the one thing I always tell people, is to keep it within your budget. It's just like, for example, Trombone. I just bought that one. That's that's an expensive title. That can go over for $500. I had never seen it in person before. It was sitting right in front of me. I'm like, I had to weigh it for a minute. I had to think in my head, because I was sitting on it. I had already made my purchase already at Game Junkies. I'm like, I don't know, can I do this or not? And I was like, okay, I got this here, can I make this shift? And I weighed the pros and the cons about, what had already been done, had everything been paid, how was I good to go? And I was good to go. I had the extra funds, so I'm like, okay, I can allocate that toward it, so it's good to go. I know when I can't. I'll know when I say, okay, no, I can't get it, I'll move on. So that's what I did with Torg. It's like, you know, there were so many heavies there that I saw, like Tel Consorto. They had, you know, other things. They had Klonoa there too. But I told myself no, because I knew I couldn't do it, because that is just way too much money. Even though I have money in my account, I don't want to, you know, go over a certain limit whenever it comes to video games. I don't want to go crazy like that. I'm not like that. I'm responsible enough to actually keep it at a minimum and not go over that. I set a budget for whenever I went game hunting, whenever I went to Torg, and I stuck to it. And, of course, I did it the last convention I went to, too, whenever I went to Big Lick. I kept to a budget, and I stuck to it. Same thing whenever, you know, I was in Game Junkies. Like I said, I had a budget, but I made an exception for that because I had the funds to allocate toward that. And plus, it is a rare title. So, again, I was fine. And plus, you know, there's some... Like I said, there's sometimes you can't do that and sometimes you can. So that's the one thing whenever it comes to collecting, you know, set yourself a budget every month. Be like, okay, I can get a heavy this month and that's it. Or I can get this many cheap games from here, this many here, this many here. That's what I do normally. A lot of people are like, how do you actually get your games? I'm like, well, I have a process on how I do that whenever it comes to, you know, game hunting. But I'll go over that more whenever, you know, we go into the pros, because that's actually part of that. So... Now, the expense thing, I covered that. It's pretty much, you know, it's like expensive, $500 here, $1,000 here, holy shit. But like I said, don't let that deter you from going for a complete set. You know, it's not a speed race. Disc rot is not really high on my list whenever it comes to the cons. However, it is still a problem that many collectors will face, and it is inevitable, especially for disc-based games. Even cartridge games are not actually prone to that because they can fail as well. Yes, there are a lot of fixes out there for things like that. You know, a lot of people like to do emulation. You know, that's a way that people actually play games versus physical hardware. But for me, being a physical collector, I find the enjoyment of actually holding a physical game, popping it in a console, and just playing it that way, because these games were made to be played. They were made to be enjoyed that way. I mean, why not actually enjoy a part of history that we grew up with, instead of leaving it, you know, to rot and not do anything with it? See, that's the thing that I always have in my head whenever it comes to that. Yes, disc rot is a thing. It will happen eventually to everything as far as like discs go. It's inevitable, but enjoy the stuff that you can enjoy while it lasts. Accessibility. That can weigh on both ends of the spectrum whenever it comes to pros and then cons. So let me explain what I mean by that. So whenever it comes to going for a complete set, you know, you're going to have your commons, you're going to have your mid-tier, you're going to have your heavies, and you're going to have your heavy hitters, which are like the ones that are $200+. You know, not all collections have that, but PlayStation 1 does. So whenever it comes to finding certain games, you know, sometimes they're easy to do whenever you look online. You can find a copy here, you can go to this convention here, you can go to DK Oldies, Lukey Games, Easterland. There's a lot of accessibility whenever it comes to game hunting nowadays. However, as you go up in the collection itself and you start to get to the final end of the stretch, sometimes titles can be a lot harder to obtain. And what do I mean by that? Well, whenever I said accessibility has a con, that's what it was. So, like, for example, whenever I went to Torg, I was looking for mainly sports titles. I actually showed a list of things that I was looking for whenever it came to the sports sets. And I looked through the entire convention. I probably missed some because there was a lot of stuff going on there, a lot happening. It was huge. But I only found 4 titles. I think I had around 15, I think, on that list. I could be wrong, but that's just from muscle memory kicking in. But still, you know, going for a complete set like that is kind of hard to do whenever it comes to specific titles like that, because if you go to a game convention, because of the fact that a lot of people don't like to carry sports titles because of the fact that they don't sell well unless they're actually something that was critically acclaimed. The only people that's going to be geared toward that kind of market are heavy collectors like myself or sports enthusiasts. So naturally, you're not going to see a lot of sports stuff around, you know, the floor whenever it comes to a convention. Now, online, yeah, you will, but there's titles out there that might not be floating around the internet, you know, because collectors are holding on to them or they just haven't listed them. So that's another thing, too, that can happen with sports titles, or, you know, even the more obscure RPGs, too. You know, there's some that are floating out there that you don't see at all. There's also demos, too. Yeah, going into the demo thing is a whole other spectrum whenever it comes to accessibility for certain ones. There's one that I could not even find for my demo set that, you know, it does exist, but I've never seen it for sale. But that is obscurity at a whole other peak. But that's one I wanted to touch base on, is that, you know, sometimes even commons can be uncommon to find, whether it be online, whether it be a convention. But again, there's pros to this about networking, about, making that accessibility expand too. So again, this is just a light thing of a little bit of a roadblock at times, but sometimes that can actually be jumped over the hump. The pros! Starting off with one that is near and dear to my heart, game hunting. What a thrill it is to go game hunting, going on a new adventure every couple months to see what the retro store has to offer, or even looking online is a whole other ballgame whenever it comes to, hunting. Yes, I do consider hunting online hunting. It doesn't have to be an actual store. It doesn't have to be at Goodwill. It doesn't have to be at a flea market. Hunting online, you're looking for those deals to add to your collection. So I enjoy that part of the hunt too. It always feels euphoric to actually score a deal on something that you've had your eye on for a long time, and you're ready to add that to your collection and even play that game because you never actually got to experience it before, which we'll be covering in another part of the pros section. But now moving on back to what I want to talk about, game hunting. Now, whenever it comes to game hunting, that opens up a lot of doors whenever it comes to those two words. So, number one I want to touch base on is retro stores. Retro stores are a dying thing. It's sad to say, but it's true. You see a lot of them close down because the retro market, is not as big. Well, I want to say it's not as big, but it's getting to the point where it's not as, affluent in some areas versus others. Like California, there's, a bigger retro scene there. Washington is huge. Where I live in bumfuck nowhere it went downhill. There's nothing. I have to travel a couple hours either way just to get to a game store anymore because the one I used to go to as a teenager is gone. They got rid of it because the retro market just wasn't here for it. There's barely any retro collectors where I live. I'm one of the very few that actually do that. So whenever I get to go to a game store, it's definitely a highlight for me to actually go in that store, see what I can add to my collection, and support that store because I want to actually keep retro game stores alive. That's one thing that I want to do. I would rather pay money at a retro store. I love getting deals online. Who doesn't? And of course, I want to make the most for my money because, as I said, game collecting is expensive. And of course, you want to make the most of your money whenever you're going for a full set. However, I will make exceptions whenever it comes to retro game stores because, I'm a customer, they have something I want, I'm physically seeing it, versus trying to pay shipping. There's a lot of perks to getting stuff in store. You could avoid the shipping prices. Sometimes they can even cut you a deal. You could do trades. There's a lot of perks to that too. And I'd rather see them have the money versus a random seller, on eBay. This is a whole other thing itself because, trying to buy stuff online, like I said, I like getting the deals and I don't bid very often. And when I do win a bid, whenever I do decide to do it, I'm like, it's mine. I get really excited. It's only happened a couple of times though, because normally people are sneaky and like to creep in there at the very last minute to just snag it right in front of you. That's happened to me before, but it is what it is. You gotta get in the game to win. But anyway, when it comes to that, buying online could be sketch, from Mercari to eBay, because I've had my fair share run-ins with people whenever it comes to buying online. And, there's a lot of resellers out there that are just selling to sell, and that's all fine and good. That's your business. That's what you do. There's some resellers that are actually, gamers and actually are adding to their collection, which that's the ones I want to, hopefully do business with, but you never know who's going to be selling on what whenever it comes to eBay or Mercari, unless you know them personally. Now, that being said, a story that I want to tell about a thing that happened with Mercari. There was a game that I was looking for. I recently just got this game from Lukey Games, and it was running wild. That game, as you remember, that was one of the cases that was broken in a recent video that I did. Out of 3 games, it was Reboot, Shanghai, a tile game, and then it was Running Wild. Well, there was a seller that was selling Running Wild. Now, I'm one of those people that if I go to a convention, if I go to, online, if they're, accepting offers, I'm going to see if I can get a little bit of money off. Because like I said, there's nothing wrong with, offering a little bit less, like $2 off. That's fair. It's not like I'm asking for $20 off of something. I'm not trading you or anything or not, doing that. I'm just asking for $2 off. Oh boy, the seller did not like that apparently. They're like, you're being a cheapo. No, I'm not going to sell it to you. It's already cheap enough. And they blocked me. I'm like, okay, well, that's fair. You know, it's fine if you don't accept my offer. I totally respect that because you want to sell it for what you want, but there's no need to be nasty like that. So, just a tip to anybody that resells out there, be kind to the people that actually buy from you because of the fact that we don't want to deal with that shit. We're out to add stuff to our collection and help you make money, you know, in the long run because you're trying to sell shit. So, be nice to us because that's not cool. And then, of course, eBay. When it comes to eBay, the Driver 2 story is something I'll never forget. A buddy of mine actually got me a copy of Driver 2, but I ended up getting a keychain instead. She ended up finding me another copy of Driver 2. Then another buddy of mine sent me another copy of Driver 2, so I don't have 2 copies. That was just another thing that I had to deal with eBay. eBay is a cesspool in itself. I would prefer Mercari, but Mercari has got like shifted some things with their fees and stuff like that. So I'm like, I don't shop on there as much as I do anymore. Now, when it comes to actual other sites, I do want to mention that whenever it comes to game hunting, I love hunting on different sites like Easterland, Lukey Games. I'm taking a break from them because of all the shitstorm that I went through, like literally 2 years of that. I finally gave up with them because I've emailed, I've dealt with it, and I'm just not doing it anymore. Everyone has their own experience whenever it comes to companies, and I have told y'all every single encounter with Lukey Games. And it's just been a cesspool, and I'm done with it. But Easterland's a great company. I've only ordered from them once, but they were pretty nice. Their selection's pretty solid, and their packing job is awesome. And of course, you all know me. I order from DK Oldies. I have been for over 3 years. I've never had a problem, not at all, with DK. So I continue to order from them every month. And I've had a lot of games for PlayStation 1 to my collection from them. They always do a great job with packing. Everything's always in great shape. Everything works wonderful. Now, of course, flea markets and stuff, I don't really get to go there too often as far as like whenever it comes to game hunting for that. There's only a couple a year here, so that's pretty much out. So whenever it comes to game hunting, you know, that's part of the thrill as far as like the pro that I said, you know, whenever I find a game and I get it at Goodwill, I get it at a game store, I get it online. The whole premise of this is that it's a euphoric feeling and it's cool to find stuff to add to my collection. Even if I don't find anything in a game store, going back on that track, it's still a good experience to go around, you know, peruse the store, see what cool stuff they got in, even if I don't take away anything. There's not a time I don't take anything away, whether it not be for PS1 or not. I always walk away with something. But even if I didn't, it's still a cool experience to actually go there, support the store, check it out, you know, and let other people know what they got, because you never know who needs something for their collection. There's a lot of nostalgia whenever it comes to collecting video games for a lot of us, me included. But there's a lot of games that I missed out on completely whenever I was younger and didn't even know existed. So that's one of the main reasons why I decided to go for a complete PS1 collection, because, like I said many, many times, PlayStation 1 is my favorite console of all time. And another key point is that it is one of the golden eras of RPGs. And you all know me, I'm a big RPG lover, so if I missed out on it, I definitely want to try it. And there's a lot that I've got to experience and that I've adored and added to my top 20 games of all time. Legend of Gaia, Thousand Arms, the Lunar games. There's just so many that I can name off that I've enjoyed playing. Now, another actual thing that I want to mention too is that there's an extra bonus to doing this as well. You know, whenever I actually stream games, I get to experience that with an audience for the very first time with a lot of these games. And some of them have played the game like, you're going to love this. And, you know, we'll talk about it as it goes on, or they'll be like, I never played this before. Let's see what's happening. So they get to actually experience it with me and get to watch on. That's another reason why I wanted to do this too, is because I love experiencing stuff with the first time with my audience. Even if you played it before, if you've not played it for, you know, 20 plus years, you get to re-experience it by watching me, and you're like, hey, I'm going to go play that. Thank you for the inspiration. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, seeing you go for a collection makes me want to collect again. Seeing you play these games makes me want to boot up my PS2, my PS1, and play this stuff again, because it just reminds me of a simpler time and the enjoyment that I had with games. And that means a lot to me to hear from you guys, that I inspire people to actually collect, to get things from their childhood, to try new games. They're like, hey, this is fucking awesome. I want to try this game. Like, hell yeah. And they'll actually go out, you know, and get it and play it, which I love seeing that. I love seeing a resurgence in the retro community and seeing people enjoy retro. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff from New Gen, don't get me wrong, but honestly, I don't really play a lot of New Gen as much as I do retro games. Retro just has more of an aesthetic for me whenever it comes to New Gen stuff. Yes, I do still play it, but not as much. I really don't. I boot up my PS2 way more than my PS5 or Switch. I'm going to be honest with you. And honestly, I've not added a lot to my PS5 collection or my Switch. I mainly been adding to PlayStation 1 and everything else that you see in here because it just is more enjoyment for me. And of course, like I said, nostalgia is a big thing too. There's a lot of games that I experienced whenever I was younger that I want to replay. And I have. Legend of Dragoon's a big one. And of course, Resident Evil 3, I play that every year. September 28th, Daylight is my favorite Resident Evil title, of course. Not Resident Evil 4! Ew! Anyway, so that's another thing too. I like to relive those games again, even if it's just for a short stint, because there's so much backlog that I have. Because that is another thing too. It just adds to the backlog whenever you go for a complete set. Because I aim to play every single game that I have. Yes, that includes the actual shovelware. Oh, that is one thing that I want to talk about too. Yes, there's a lot of shovelware for PlayStation 1. There's a lot of terrible games that I played, trust me. But there's a lot of weird-ass games that I've enjoyed playing, like Blue's Clues and then Elmo's Number Journey and Letter Adventure. Oh my god, that was a fucking funny-ass stream. There's little oddball titles like that. Even though they're bad games, they've been memorable moments for me on stream with my audience and my friends, my community. So I cherish those memories. I live for those memories. That's one of the key points that I wanted to make, is that, that's one reason I do this, is because I love actually sharing stuff with the community, having laughs, making memories like that. That is definitely one of the perks about streaming and sharing these moments with people, that I just wanted to convey. And whenever it comes to, playing these games, like I said, I aim to play them all, sports titles and all, and I will do that because I pay to play. I don't play, I don't pay to collect. I pay to play, as I always said. But that is the main points that I wanted to make as far as like the pros and cons with collecting. I hope this video actually helped you out in some way, at least from my journey, my perspective on things whenever it comes to video game collecting. Definitely drop me some comments if you like, any questions that you may have that I've encountered on my journey as far as collecting goes. But until next time, my friends, this is the PlayStation Girl signing out. Game on!